Welcome to Sketchbook Legends. I'm your artist, Paul Hostetler. Today we're going to be drawing a goblin. Just a simple little goblin wearing a helmet, wearing some armor, dressed up in goblin clothes, holding a little goblin spear. Obviously, I'm going to be taking some amount of inspiration from Brian Froud. If you know about Brian Froud, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know, he is the artist and designer who worked on Jim Henson's Dark Crystal and The Labyrinth, both of which are filled with goblins and goblin-like creatures. He also has illustrated a number of books, specializing particularly in fairies and ogres and goblins and trolls and the like. A really excellent fantasy illustrator there. Does wonderful things with watercolor. One of my favorite books by him is called, I think, the Smashed Fairies book. The premise is that a young girl has caught fairies by getting them to sit down on the pages of her book, and then she quickly closes the book and squashes the fairies. It's darkly amusing. In the Froud tradition, I am having my goblin be kind of asymmetrical. So you see his hat there has one horn, and on the other side of it, it's got a faucet spigot. And that's, a direct reference to the pop-up book of goblins or something to that effect. But the goblin on the cover has like an upside-down tureen for a helmet. One side's got a big horn coming out of it. The other side has a faucet spigot with a drip running out of it. Once again, I am using my favorite Kuretake Bimoji brush pen. It's just got such a lovely line, and it allows me some nice thick and thins all in the same stroke. I've gotten real used to the feel of this pen in my hand and the kind of lines that it makes. I don't think I'll ever stop using these, and I really, really hope that the company never goes out of business or gets bought by a private equity firm. I've made my goblin here a little bit snaggletooth, as goblins should be. One of the things about goblins is that they are almost always kind of asymmetrical, with bad dental work and terrible skin. I've got mine with some little prepubescent hairs coming out of his chin, and a little facial hair that hasn't quite sprouted. But I think I read an essay about a decade ago, maybe longer, in which it was pointed out that while elves and fairies are always portrayed as a little bit childlike, they have fair skin and bright eyes, and they skip to and fro. Even the leprechauns, are tiny little people. Goblins are generally portrayed as more mischievous, and they've got warts and hairs and bad skin. If elves and smaller, kinder, nicer fantasy creatures are reminiscent of children, then goblins and trolls and ogres are reminiscent of adolescents, specifically adolescent boys. You always see a lot of fairies that are girls. You see a lot of elves that are girls. I think in Lord of the Rings, you have Galadriel, who's the most beautiful and wisest of all the elves, and then she's also got a husband who has one line and is never seen again, and is clearly not that important to the story. But all the orcs in The Lord of the Rings are male. They sort of carouse and make trouble and mayhem in the way that adolescent boys will. To that effect, I've given my goblin here a little an earring so as to suggest he's a bit of a bad boy, or possibly a pirate. Now we're working on the helmet. You can see on the pencil lines underneath that I've drawn the goblin's entire head underneath the helmet before I drew the helmet on. Whenever you have a head covering on a character you're drawing, you want to draw the entire head underneath so that you get the placement of the hat or the helmet correct, so that it looks like it could actually be sitting on his head and is not just a bunch of marks above the face area. Doing a little work on the little accoutrements. That's a French word meaning just a bunch of crap. But that's part of the fun of drawing goblins, is that they're not simple folk. They're not hobbits or elves who just wear flowy gowns. They're not giants who just wear furry togas. Part of the fun of drawing a goblin is trying to figure out what sort of motley clothes they would be wearing. If they're wearing armor, it almost goes without saying that they probably found it, or at least found the materials which were not armor to begin with and turned them into armor. They'll make clothes, in my mind, goblins will make clothes out of burlap bags and scraps of fur or hides that they find. And the same goes for pretty much everything that they wear. That hat is probably an upside-down cup. You can see I've given him a bird skull as a shoulder pauldron. And I decided that some of his armor there on his arm was going to be made out of bark, like just tree bark. That may be another signifier of the goblin in general, is that goblins are poor. Going back to the elves, Galadriel's gowns are not only gorgeous, but they are spotless and they're tailored to fit. Galadriel has a gown for every occasion, and she can change them at whim, and she always looks spectacular, and all of her jewelry is always perfectly polished. The orcs in that movie, all their armor and their clothes look like they're raggedy, look like they're hand-me-downs, look like they've been used to death. If they haven't just been, actually used to death and then pulled off a dead person and reused, because hey, a piece of metal is a piece of metal. Maybe it'll deflect a sword blow. I've got my little guy wearing bark as part of his armor, and on his glove there I've got just a piece of sheet metal that's clearly been cut out in a spiky pattern as a little sort of offensive weapon. Spiky knuckle dusters. You can absolutely imagine the kind of weapon he's attempting to recreate, and how a made-from-scratch version of that sort of spiky glove would be so much better than what he's capable of getting his hands on. If you can hear that in the background, the cat is taking a shit. That's what that noise is. He's got a janky looking spear made of like an uncarved branch, an unshaved branch with a string tied around it. He probably found a piece of string. He thought, I'll use that later. I'll find something else to tie with that piece of string. But going back to, class consciousness and all that, because I know that's always a winner on the internet. I don't think it's a surprise that, yeah, that's the cat shit screaming. He's finished pooping. He's just announcing it to the world. You have anything else you want to say, Eddie? Nah, he just wanted to announce his poops. But one of the things that there's a such thing now as Goblin Core. There's going Goblin mode. As far as I can tell, that's just sort of working from home or lounging at home in a sort of disgusting manner, wearing unfashionable sweat clothes, sweatpants, watching TV, just sort of feeling gross while enjoying yourself, indulging in guilty pleasures, if you will. Apparently that's called going Goblin mode. I've never used that term myself. But then there are 8 billion people on the planet. I'm sure there are a lot of things that I don't do myself. I think there's a little bit of relatability to goblins, because unlike the elves, who are always very well put together, goblins are never put together, and goblins are lower class, and goblins never leave that angry, awkward adolescent stage of life, which pretty much sums up quite a lot of the populace since the internet was created. I'm guessing that includes some Generation Xers, a lot of millennials, and the generations that came after that, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, whatever the hell they're called. These things don't actually exist. There's no dividing line. It's just target words for marketers to use. But having personally spent my adult life trying to make it as an artist, failing, living through 2 recessions, 2 absolutely terrible Republican presidents, and finding the cheapest way to enjoy my life is usually just to watch something on the internet. It's practically free. Doesn't require you to put on nice clothes or go out. Goblins are relatable. There's an endless series of things to be irrationally upset about and make that sort of eyebrow furrowed goblin face. And the fact that pretty much everything from my childhood is still available to me, sometimes in adult form. I loved Transformers as a kid. I can still buy them. They cost $200 now. It's like adolescence never left me. I'm still pretty much middle to lower class, if not outright poor. I'm still trying to cobble my art career out of, pieces of detritus. I think bird skulls are cool. I don't have a hat like that, but I kind of wish I did. I kind of wish I had the facilities to make myself a cool, one-horned, faucet-headed Brian Frood hat. But I can't afford a house. I live in like a hole in a large building, kind of like, the goblins in that Hobbit movie that was so terrible. All the goblins live in one mountain. I assume they all have their own little hole. And they all come scurrying out whenever anything interesting is happening, probably with their smartphones, so they can post it to Goblin Instagram. This is what it's like to be a young professional, an artist these days, a millennial. You are perpetually trapped in Goblin mode. It often feels like it takes an inordinate amount of effort to simply decide not to be in Goblin mode. I haven't even bothered to talk about like anything since those spiky knuckle dusters. You can see one's got 3 prongs, the other has 2 prongs. They're probably cut from the same rectangle of metal. And I deliberately made his spear there have the head of a can opener. He's a little guy. Maybe he has trouble getting into some of the bigger cans. And I'm putting some texture on his pants there. It's not like he has armor on his legs. He's just wearing dungarees. He has a patch on his knee. It looks like, I think I wanted to make his armor look like it was made out of leather or more bark. It's not great. You can tell that if this guy's getting into any serious battles, he's gonna die immediately. And he's putting on, an angry face, but I tried to make it look like the angry face on him with the furrowed brows. This was something that he's doing for himself as a show. Sometimes you put on a show for society, you wear a mask. There's a whole bunch of psychological stuff behind that. It's about how you want to be portrayed. He's got some steel-toed boots. This is a guy who knows he's a goblin, and he's decided to sort of embrace that personality. If goblins are meant to scowl and stick their teeth out and furrow their brows, he's gonna do it just so people can go, eek, he's a goblin, he's got a can opener. And they'll laugh at him, and he'll be like, yes, but you're laughing with me because I'm in on the joke. I'm just throwing in some sort of Jack Davis textures on his dungarees there to make it look like they're just really filthy. I heard a thing once where originally blue jeans were designed to never be washed. You'd sort of apparently ruin the jeans if you cleaned them with soap and water. They're just meant to be worn, and that sort of makes them stronger, which is a very Goblin mode way to think. Cleaning oneself is for the weak. Not a sentiment I personally feel, but if life treated you like it treated goblins, who knows what a person might be capable of. Well, we're getting to the end, but I just wanted to point out that when you're drawing a fantasy creature, there has to be some level of realism to it, just in the way that physical objects work. For example, when I was drawing this goblin, it was very important to me that all these pieces of armor attached to the body in some way, either with string or with rivets or with leather belts. It just adds a level of not only detail, but of realism. It shows that you've thought things through and that you're not just going by rule of cool. And while Rule of Cool can, live up to its name and be cool, it sort of traps you eventually in an ever-escalating contest of trying to one-up yourself in being cool. And you end up just trying too hard to be cool. Much better to throw enough realism into a drawing, back away from the coolness a little bit, and just create some problems for yourself to solve as an artist. I think it helps with drawing the viewer in, and it helps them sort of immerse themselves in the world that you're creating, even if the world is just a single character. And that's my Goblin. Probably won't be the last one that I draw, and it definitely wasn't the first. But it was the first that I've filmed for YouTube. If you liked what you saw, you can click the like button. If you want to see more of these, click the subscribe, because we do update every Wednesday afternoon. A new drawing, a new video, a new voiceover by me, talking while I'm drawing. If you want to be notified when new videos drop, you can click that little bell icon. And if you want to find me elsewhere on the internet, I am available at Patreon and Ko-Fi. I'm also on Blue Sky at phostetlerart, and that'll be all. Stay sketching, stay legendary, and see you next time.